My husband insisted that I apologize to his female best friend for upsetting her. I agreed. I showed up at her house, looking calm and gracious, like a woman who had come to make peace. But when I did what I actually came to do, neither of them recovered from the shock till date. My name is Rebecca. I'm 45. I am a licensed pharmacist running my own small pharmaceutical firm in Austin, Texas. My husband Fred and I have been married for 12 years, and we have 2 kids, Mary, who is 10 years old, and Daniel, who is 8 years old. And until 2 weeks ago, I thought my marriage was solid, but I now realize that I was wrong. It was a Thursday evening, and I remember it clearly because I had just come off a long shift at the pharmacy. My feet hurt. I had skipped lunch, and the drive home through Texas traffic had taken 40 minutes longer than it should have. All I wanted was to sit down, check on my kids, eat, and rest. Fred was already home when I got there, which was unusual. He worked late most Thursdays, but today he was surprisingly home. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone face down. He had this angry look on his face. He didn't even bother to welcome me the way a husband should when his wife returns home after a long shift. I set my bag down and went to the sink to wash my hands. "How was your day?" I asked, mostly out of habit. "We need to talk," he said without even bothering to respond to my question. I dried my hands and turned around. "Okay, about what?" I asked. "About Sophia, my best friend," he replied, leaning forward. He placed his elbow on the table as he spoke. He said Sophia had called him that afternoon complaining that she was upset. She told him that she had been feeling off since the dinner gathering we attended the previous weekend at his colleague's house, where I had said something to her that apparently left her uncomfortable, and she felt disrespected. I stood very still and looked at him. The previous Saturday at that dinner, Sophia had positioned herself inappropriately next to Fred for most of the evening. She laughed at everything he said. She touched his arms and chest when she talked to him. Not once, not as a natural gesture between friends, but repeatedly. At one point, her hand rested on his lower back for long enough that the woman standing next to me noticed and glanced at me sideways. It was very obvious that she was flirting with my husband right in my presence. I had waited until there was a quiet moment, and I had pulled Sophia aside, just the 2 of us, near the hallway. I had been calm. I had not raised my voice. I told her, simply and directly, that I would appreciate it if she were more mindful of how she touched my husband. That was all I said. I did not insult her. I did not threaten her. I stated a boundary, calmly, like an adult. Then I had walked back to the dinner table and said nothing more about it for the rest of the evening. And now my husband was sitting at my kitchen table telling me she was upset about it. She felt disrespected. I repeated slowly, "Rebecca." Fred called my name almost in a loud voice. "She's my friend. She wasn't trying to flirt with me. She wasn't trying to flirt with you." I repeated, "Do you see how she touched your chest and arms at intervals? Did you see how her hand rested on your lower back for more than 10 seconds? Fred, that's not a normal touch." He exhaled through his nose, the way he did when he thought I was being unreasonable, and then he said, "You're being paranoid again, Rebecca. Sophia is my friend. She is affectionate. That's just how she is, and you know that. You've known her for 15 years. But you choose to embarrass her." "Embarrass her?" I asked. "How exactly did I embarrass her?" I turned to face him before I continued. I quietly pulled her aside and asked her to be more respectful. I didn't make a scene. I didn't abuse her. How exactly did I embarrass her? Fred cut me off immediately. "Well, Sophia felt embarrassed. She is not happy over the confrontation, and now things are awkward between all of us, and you know how much I value our friendship." Fred stepped closer, his voice dropping to that controlled tone. That meant he already decided how this would end. "I need you to apologize to her." I blinked. "Apologize?" "Yes," he said, looking at me straight in the eyes. "Fix this. Show her you respect our friendship. Let her know that you are sorry." That was the line that told me everything I needed to know. Our friendship, not my marriage, not my feelings, but their friendship. It became very obvious that he values her feelings more than mine. I looked at Fred, my husband, the man who was supposed to protect me from the world, the man who was meant to be my succor, stood there and told me to apologize to his best friend for politely setting boundaries. And I felt like a stranger standing in my own house. I nodded slowly. All right, I said, I'll apologize to Sophia. Fred blinked. He had clearly been prepared for an argument or a refusal from my end, but I gave him none. Really? Yes, I'll apologize. I kept my voice calm and even. I'll talk to Sophia to clear the air. He relaxed immediately. His shoulders dropped and the tension left his jaw. He even smiled a little. Thank you, Rebecca. I know that's not easy for you, but it means a lot. Don't worry, Fred, I replied. I'll make sure we have a real conversation, and I'll let her know how sorry I am. He smiled, pulled me into a tight hug, and said, Thank you so much. I didn't respond. My mind was already racing. He was hugging me because I had agreed to apologize to Sophia, the same kind of hug he couldn't give me when I came home exhausted. Now he held me close, not out of care, but out of relief. Relief that I had agreed to apologize without a fight. But he had no idea what kind of conversation I was planning to have with Sophia. That night, I didn't sleep. Fred fell asleep before 10 o'clock. He had always been a heavy sleeper, one of those people who close their eyes and are simply gone within minutes, completely unbothered by whatever the day had carried. I used to find it endearing. That night, I found it convenient because it gave me enough time to think everything through. I lay beside him in the dark for about 20 minutes, watching the ceiling fan turn slowly. My mind was running through small details I had dismissed, things I had looked at briefly over the past several months and set aside without examining too closely because I had trusted my husband and did not want to be that suspicious, insecure woman who reads meaning into everything. The late-night texts which made him laugh happily, and when I asked who it was or what was funny, he would say nothing, just Sophia or just a meme. And he would tilt the screen slightly away and change the subject so smoothly I had never noticed how consistently he did it. I had also noticed how soft and relaxed his voice is anytime he speaks with Sophia. Like whatever tension he carried through the day left his body the moment he heard her voice on the other end. I had noticed it, and I had told myself it was simply the ease of a long friendship. 15 years of knowing someone well enough to be completely comfortable. I let go of so many things, ruling them as simply friendship. Sophia was a great lady. Yes, at least I have known her for a long time, but recently something felt off about how close she and my husband had become. Just last month, the first week of March, Sophia turned 38. Fred had mentioned it casually at breakfast a few days before. He said her birthday was coming up and that he was thinking of getting her something small. I had said that was nice of him and thought nothing more about it. Fred came home that Friday with a neatly packaged gift bag. Inside, it was a delicate gold bracelet from a designer boutique. It was something thoughtful, personal, and clearly not last minute. He said he was going to drop it off at her office on his way home from work the following day. My own birthday came 2 weeks later in the last week of March. Fred forgot. He remembered eventually late in the afternoon when Mary mentioned it at the dinner table, and his face shifted with the sudden awareness of a man who had just remembered something important. He apologized. He took me to dinner the following weekend and said it had been a crazy few weeks at work. I had accepted it because I loved him and because people forget things and because I did not want to be the kind of wife who kept scores. But he had not forgotten Sophia's birthday. He had planned for it. He had gone out and bought an expensive gold bracelet and drove to her office by himself to deliver it. I lay in the dark, and for the first time, every detail I had previously ignored in the interest of keeping the peace, of being reasonable, and of not becoming a woman who sees problems where there are none began to make sense to me. Then I reached across to his nightstand carefully and picked up his phone. I tried to open it with the password that I knew, but it failed. I never knew my husband had already changed his password without telling me. I was not the type of wife who goes through her husband's phone unless there is something important I need to do with it. I had always believed that trust meant exactly that. You either trusted someone or you didn't, and I had always trusted Fred completely. But seeing that his passcode had been changed, coupled with how he was defending Sophia that evening, made me more curious about what he was hiding. I tried using a nickname he often used, the one I had also heard Sophia call him before, and it worked. I opened his messages. Sophia's name was near the top of the list. The most recent message in the thread was from that afternoon, the call he had mentioned, her saying she was upset about the dinner, and my husband assuring her that he would talk to me and make sure I apologized to her. I scrolled past it and went further back into the thread. Believe me when I say that the messages I saw between them were not what you would expect between two old friends catching up. The messages had a kind of closeness and ease and intimacy that went beyond 15 years of friendship into something that had no business existing between a married man and a married woman. They didn't just chat once a day. They spoke multiple times. And sometimes he called her up to 3 times a day to check on her. Yet, he only called me once a day, and sometimes didn't call at all, with the excuse that work was hectic. There were inside jokes I had never heard Fred mention. There were references to conversations they had clearly had in private, phone calls I had not known about. There was a particular kind of shorthand between them, the kind that only develops between two people who have been sharing more of themselves with each other than they have been sharing with anyone else. I kept scrolling. Further back. My breathing stayed even. My hand stayed steady. And then I found a message that Fred had sent on a night I remembered clearly. It was the night of Daniel's school concert 3 months ago. Fred had arrived 20 minutes late, slipping into the seat I had saved for him, just as Daniel's class walked onto the stage. He had squeezed my hand and whispered that traffic had been terrible. After the concert, he had lifted Daniel onto his shoulders in the parking lot, and Daniel had laughed, and I had taken a photograph of them and thought, this is a good life. Fred had sent Sophia a message at 7:43 that evening while I was sitting in that school auditorium saving him a seat, while our son was backstage preparing to perform. He had texted her telling her that he wished he was there with her, and she had replied with a heart emoji and a voice note telling him that she missed him so much and couldn't wait to have him in her arms. I read it 3 times, my heart burning with rage. I went deeper into the thread, further back, past months of messages. And what I found as I kept scrolling was not just evidence of an emotional closeness that had gone too far. It was a detailed, consistent, undeniable timeline of an affair that had been disguised as friendship, an affair that had been running parallel to my marriage for a long time. I took screenshots quietly and methodically and sent everything to my personal email. Believe me when I say that the messages alone told a story that covered at least 24 months. But the messages were only the beginning. Then I opened his photo gallery and cloud backups, places he probably assumed I would never check. There were photos of Fred and Sophia in a hotel room, restaurants, and screenshots of a hotel bookings dated the same weekend I attended a 2-day work conference out of state. Fred had encouraged me to go. He had been unusually enthusiastic about it, telling me I worked too hard, that I deserved the time away, that he would handle everything at home. I had called him from my hotel room on Saturday night, and he had answered on the 3rd ring, sounding relaxed, telling me the kids were spending the weekend at their grandmother's house, and he was just watching a game. I had told him I loved him. He said he loved me too and ended the call. Now, I could see the truth. He had sent the kids away, so he could have time with Sophia at that hotel. That was when I checked our joint bank account, and I discovered that he had been funding his affair with Sophia using money from our account. The hotel charges, the gifts, everything had been paid for without my notice. I was broken, yes, anyone would be, but the most painful part came when I opened his email and saw a message Sophia had sent 4 months ago, telling him she was pregnant with his child. My head almost burst. They had both decided to cover it up by terminating the pregnancy. My husband had sent her money for it. Fred, my husband, had not just had an affair with Sophia, but that affair had led to a pregnancy, one that had been quietly handled and erased while I went on living my life completely unaware, cooking his meals, running our home, and supporting him. I let myself feel the pain, but I refused to cry. By 5 a.m. that morning, I had a folder full of undeniable evidence of betrayal that proved that Fred and Sophia, his so-called best friend, had been having an affair spanning over 24 months. I put the phone back on the nightstand exactly as I had found it. Then I lay back down in the dark next to my husband. He shifted in his sleep and his arm moved toward me the way it always did. That old unconscious habit of reaching for me even while he was completely unaware. I lay completely still and let his arm settle, and I stared at the ceiling, deeply lost in thought. One question kept coming to my mind. If Fred loves Sophia so much, why didn't he marry her instead of friend-zoning her? Why did Fred leave his so-called best friend, who he claimed understands him better than I do, to marry me, then turn around to secretly cheat on me with her? It didn't make sense to me at all because, for crying out loud, when he introduced her to me as his best friend a month after we started dating, there was nothing that showed that they had anything going on between them other than simple friendship. In fact, I had liked Sophia instantly because she was funny in a way that made me laugh throughout that day. I had even at one point jokingly asked Fred if he had ever considered dating her, but he told me specifically that she was just his friend and that he saw her as his younger sister. She was also in a serious relationship with her boyfriend, Robert. They got married 1 year after Fred, and I did. I was sincerely happy for her. We had our first daughter 1 month before she got married. She was my daughter's godmother. This was Fred's suggestion, and I didn't have any issues with that. So I agreed. She came to my home at will, and she's always in our home at every gathering, every celebration, and every Tuesday when she called to check in. I didn't have any issues with it until recently when she started being overly close and flirty with Fred. And Fred, on the other hand, started being more secretive and finally crossed the line by telling me to go and apologize to Sophia, even though she was obviously flirting with him, which felt like a slap in my face. I lay on the bed till morning. Then I stood up and went to the kitchen to make myself some coffee. Fred came down 30 minutes later, all fresh and dressed for work. "You're up early," he said, reaching out for the cup of coffee on the table. "Yes, I couldn't sleep well," I replied. "I've been thinking about that conversation with Sophia. I think I overreacted, just like you said. I am sorry about that, and I sincerely want to apologize to her personally. When should I reach out to her?" He brightened immediately. "Really? Maybe this weekend? She is free this Saturday afternoon." "All right, I'll text her today so that we can arrange a meetup." He smiled happily, wrapped me in an embrace, and planted a kiss on my cheek. "Thank you, Rebecca. This really means a lot." I nodded slightly. I watched him leave for work, humming happily like someone who had just won a lottery. He was obviously happy that his wife was about to apologize to his lover, but little did he know that this was about to get messy. After he left, I woke the kids up. They didn't go to school that day because they were on holiday after they had taken their bath, eaten, and were relaxed. I called my daughter Mary into the sitting room. I sat across from her and kept my voice soft and easy, the way you speak to a child when you need them to feel safe enough to tell you the truth. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "Can I ask you something?" She sat up a little straighter. "Sure, Mom. Have you noticed anything different lately? Around the house? Anything that felt a little off to you? Maybe from Daddy?" She looked at me carefully, that look children get when they are holding something they were told not to share. I recognized it immediately because Mary had always been a child who took instructions seriously. If someone asked her to keep something private, she kept it not out of fear, but out of loyalty. She was that kind of girl. "What do you mean?" She asked carefully. "You can talk to me honestly," I said. "Whatever you say stays between us. I just need to know if there is anything you have been carrying that has been making you feel uncomfortable." She was quiet for a moment. She bit her bottom lip the way she always did when she was making a decision. Then she set her hands in her laps and looked at me. "Mom," she said slowly. I wasn't going to say anything, but I think I need to. I waited. She told me that about 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday afternoon when I was at work covering a half shift, she had come home earlier than expected. She had been at her friend's house down the road and had come back to pick up something she had forgotten. When she walked in through the front door, Auntie Sophia's car was parked in our driveway. She said she walked into the kitchen and found her father and Sophia standing very close together near the counter. Not in a normal way. Close in a way that made her stop in the doorway. She said the moment they heard her footsteps, they moved apart quickly. Too quickly, like people who had been caught doing something they knew they should not be doing. I kept my face very still and calm. Mary said Sophia had smiled at her and said she had just popped by to drop something off and was on her way out. Fred had smiled too, that easy casual smile he wore when he wanted everything to look normal. Sophia left within minutes, and once she was gone, Fred had sat Mary down and told her that Auntie Sophia's visit was their little secret. He said he did not want Mummy to feel left out since she had not been home, and that it was better not to mention it because it might upset me unnecessarily. My 10-year-old daughter had been asked by her father to keep secrets from me. I reached over and took her hand. You did nothing wrong, I told her. Nothing at all. I am glad you told me. She nodded, her eyes a little watery. Are you and Daddy okay? She asked quietly. We are working through some things, I said carefully, but whatever happens between your father and me has absolutely nothing to do with you or Daniel. You understand that? She nodded again, and I hugged her, holding her for a moment longer than usual. After I sent her back to her room, I stood in the living room alone for a minute. Then I walked upstairs, went to our bedroom, opened Fred's wardrobe, and moved aside the section where he kept his heavier clothes at the back. That was when I remembered something Mary had said earlier. She had mentioned packages. She told me that occasionally items were delivered to the house, and Fred would ask her to bring them inside quickly before I saw them. He told her they were surprises for me. She had believed him because she loved her father and had no reason not to. I found them toward the back of the wardrobe. 2 boxes. I opened the first one. Designer shirts, still with their tags attached. Expensive and neatly folded. A leather jacket in a rich brown bag. A bottle of cologne, not a brand Fred wore. Not a scent I had ever smelled on him. The sizes were Fred's, but the choices were not his. Fred had never in 10 years of marriage bought himself a leather jacket or reached for designer shirts without being encouraged to. These were things someone had chosen for him, things someone had bought with a particular taste and a particular knowledge of what he would look good in. I stood in that wardrobe for a moment and let that settle. Then I put everything back exactly as I had found it, walked downstairs, and sat on the couch, my heart racing fast. I was still sitting there when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophia. I stared at her name on the screen for a moment before I opened it. She had written, "Hey Rebecca, Fred mentioned you wanted to talk. I think that's a really good idea. I've been feeling terrible about the tension between us, and I really want us to clear the air. Would you be open to coming over tomorrow? I really value what we have, and I don't want any weirdness between us. Let me know." I read it twice. Fred had called her. Of course he had. He had left this house humming to himself. And the first thing he had done was call Sophia and tell her that his wife wanted to talk, probably framing it as me coming around, me softening, me ready to smooth things over like a good, reasonable woman. She had responded with that message. Warm and careful. She had no idea what would be waiting for her. I typed back a reply that was short, pleasant, and gave absolutely nothing away. That works perfectly, Sophia. I'll see you tomorrow. I set the phone down on the cushion beside me. Tomorrow I am going to walk into Sophia's home. I was going to have the most important conversation of all of our lives, but it was not going to be the conversation Sophia had expected. I got to Sophia's house at exactly 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. I had dropped Mary and Daniel at my mother's place earlier that morning and told her I had something urgent to handle. I sat in Sophia's driveway for about 30 seconds after I parked. Not because I was nervous. I was not nervous. I was the calmest I had been in days, which probably sounds strange, but makes complete sense when you understand that I had spent the past 24 hours preparing for exactly this moment. My folder was organized. I knew every word I was going to say, and exactly when I was going to say it. I stepped out of the car, walked up to the front door, and rang the bell. Sophia answered within a minute. She was dressed casually, hair down, looking relaxed, and warm the way she always looked when she was at home. She smiled when she saw me, that wide, genuine-looking smile that I now understood had been practiced on me for years. "Rebecca," she said, opening the door wider. "I am so glad you came. Come in." I stepped inside. The living room was comfortable and familiar. I had been in this house twice before, and it looked largely the same, clean, well-arranged, the kind of home that reflected two people with steady incomes and matching taste. There were flowers on the side table, soft music playing somewhere in the background, and there, seated in the living room with a bottle of beer in his hand, laughing at something that had clearly just been said, was Fred. He looked up when I walked in, and his expression shifted, not dramatically, just a small recalibration, the look of a man who had not quite expected his wife to arrive at the exact moment he was sitting comfortably in his girlfriend's living room. He recovered quickly and smiled. "Hey," he said easily. "Didn't know you were coming so soon." I looked at him for a moment without responding. Then I looked at Robert, who was sitting across from Fred, relaxed, completely unaware of anything, holding his own drink and smiling at me politely the moment I came in through the door. "You're welcome, Rebecca. It's actually a long time since I last saw you." I smiled slightly and said, "It's good to see you, Robert." Sophia gestured toward the sofa. "Sit down, please. Can I get you something to drink? I made some juice earlier." "No, thank you," I said. I sat down, placed my bag on my lap, and looked at her directly. "I'm fine." She sat across from me, smoothing her dress, still wearing that smile. Fred leaned back in his chair, slightly relaxed, probably assuming this was going to be a 5-minute conversation that ended with me apologizing gracefully, and everyone going back to their drinks. Sophia clasped her hands together and leaned forward slightly. "Rebecca, I just want to say first that I really appreciate you coming. It means a lot that you are willing to talk this through because I genuinely value our friendship, and the last thing I ever wanted was for us to have any issues." "Sophia," I said. She stopped. "I did not come here to apologize. I have actually come to talk to you and your husband. Fortunately, Fred is also here. I think this is actually the best possible situation. We can straighten everything out together." The room shifted. It was subtle, but I felt it, the way the air changes when something unexpected enters it. Sophia's smile froze slightly at the edges, like a photograph taken a half-second too late. Fred straightened in his chair. Robert looked between us mildly, not yet understanding that anything serious was happening. I reached into my bag and took out the folder. I opened the folder I had spent hours putting together. I laid it on the table. I looked at Sophia and calmly said the following. "Fred insisted that I apologize to you for confronting you last weekend at the dinner. So I think if I'm going to apologize, I should do it properly. I need to clear the air completely to avoid future misunderstandings. I think it is time everyone in this room knows the truth." Robert glanced between us, sensing something shift in the room. Fred shifted in his seat. "Rebecca," Fred started. "Fred," I held up a hand. "Please do not speak right now." He closed his mouth. I turned back to Sophia. "You and Fred have been having an affair for the past 24 months. I have the evidence here, and I am going to show it to you now, not because I need you to confirm it. I do not need your confirmation, but because I want us to straighten things out once and for all." Sophia opened her mouth. "Rebecca, that is not the truth." "You can deny it all you want, but I have your messages," I said as I opened the folder on the table and pulled out printouts of the messages. "I have all of them," I continued. "I have timestamps, locations, photographs, hotel booking confirmations, and bank records showing that this affair was funded from our joint account." I paused. "I also have the message you sent him 4 months ago telling him you were pregnant, and the transaction confirming that he sent you money to terminate that pregnancy." The room went completely silent, not the polite silence of people waiting for someone to finish speaking. The deep, heavy silence of people who have just heard something that has permanently changed the shape of the room they are sitting in. Robert put his drink down slowly. He turned and looked at his wife with an expression I will not forget for as long as I live, not anger yet, not even disbelief, just a man watching the floor disappear from beneath him in real time. Sophia had gone pale. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had lost their color. Fred was staring at a point on the floor somewhere between his feet, not moving, not speaking, not doing anything at all. These are the documents that show the receipts of the hotel bookings, dinner nights, and restaurants my husband took you to using money from our joint marital account. The dates are clear, the photos are clear, and the receipts are clearly printed out. Robert picked up the folder with a steady hand. He looked at it page by page. His jaw tightened, but he did not speak. Sophia looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Rebecca, please, can we just talk privately?" "No," I said. "There is nothing to discuss in private. I have known you for 15 years. I trusted you in my home. I trusted you with my children. I trusted you with my marriage. And for 24 months, you stood in my life and looked at my face and did what you did." She was crying now. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I turned to Fred. He finally looked up at me. His face had a combination of shame and fear, and something that might have been relief, the way people look when something they have been carrying in secret finally comes into the open, and they no longer have to hold its weight alone. That look made me feel something I had not expected. Not sympathy, just a final, complete clarity. "Fred," I said, "our marriage is over. I will be filing for divorce. So you will be hearing from my lawyer soon. You chose Sophia for 24 months while I was in our home raising our children and running our household and trusting you completely. So I have made a decision." I looked between the two of them. Then I continued. "I am not going to fight for a man who was never fully mine to begin with. Sophia, since you clearly cannot take your eyes off my husband, since you chose him repeatedly and deliberately over everything else, I am giving him to you. He is yours. I give him to you freely. You have my full blessing. I hope he is everything you believed he was worth throwing away 2 marriages for." Fred flinched. Robert set my folder down on the coffee table and stood up from his chair. He did not look at his wife. He did not look at Fred. He looked at me and said quietly, "I am sorry this happened to you." I nodded at him. "I am sorry it happened to you too." He picked up his car keys from the side table and walked out of his own living room without another word. We heard the front door open and close. Then the sound of his car starting in the driveway. Then nothing. Fred stood up. "Rebecca, please, just listen to me for 1 minute." "No, I won't," I replied, my voice steady. Sophia pressed her hand over her mouth and cried out loud. She turned to me, and all the charm had evaporated. "What do you want?" she said, sobbing. "What do I want?" I said quietly. I wanted to apologize. Sophia, like Fred insisted. "So here it is. I'm sorry I didn't see what you really were sooner. I'm sorry I let you into my home around my kids. I'm sorry I trusted you to the extent of letting you be a godmother to my daughter even when you lack good morals. And I'm deeply sorry for what I'm about to do to your life." "Are you threatening me?" she asked. "No, I am not threatening you," I replied, smiling without humor. "I am telling you facts. I will be filing for divorce and will be listing you as a correspondent in adultery proceedings. Every text, every hotel receipt, every dollar my husband gave you from our joint marital account, it will all be public record." I turned to Fred and said, "I have listened to you for 10 years. I will not be listening anymore. You can be with Sophia, since she is the woman you want." I picked the folder from the coffee table and put it back in my bag. Then I stood up, straightened my dress, and walked out of the living room, leaving 2 shattered adulterers whose lies had been exposed. The afternoon sun was warm, and the street outside was quiet and ordinary, the kind of afternoon that has no idea what has just happened inside the house behind you. I walked to my car in the driveway, got in, closed the door, and sat for about 5 minutes before I drove off. And for the first time since that Thursday evening when Fred sat at my kitchen table and asked me to apologize to Sophia, I let myself cry. Not the quiet, controlled kind, but the deep, painful kind that comes from a woman whose heart had been broken, whose love had been taken for granted, and whose loyalty had been spat on. I cried for my marriage, for the 10 years I had given completely and genuinely. I cried for trusting my husband too much. I cried for my children who were at their grandmother's house right now, with no idea that their family was about to look completely different. My phone started ringing while I was still sitting in my car. It was Fred. I watched his name light up the screen, and I let it ring out. He called again, immediately. I let that one ring out too, then a third time. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and sat there until the calls stopped. When I picked it back up, he had called 10 times in total. He also sent 2 apology messages, but I ignored them all. I don't have time to speak to him. I don't have time for his lies. He can keep his explanations to himself. I wiped my tears. Then I picked my phone up from the passenger's seat and dialed the number of one of Austin, Texas's ruthless divorce attorneys. Her name was Carol Mensah. My colleague had given me her number after she professionally helped her through her messy divorce. The name I had stored in the back of my mind weeks ago when I first felt something was wrong, but did not yet have the evidence to act on. I called her. She did not answer. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had not expected her to. But I just needed to reach out. So I left a voicemail. I told her my name and that I needed to schedule a consultation as soon as possible regarding a divorce filing. I told her I had documentation and that I was ready to move forward. I left my number and ended the call. I pulled back onto the road and drove home. But before I got home, I received a call from Carol's assistant, and we scheduled an appointment for 9 a.m. on Monday morning. Fred's car was already in the driveway when I got home. I had not expected him to be home, but I was not surprised either. He had probably left Sophia's house minutes after I did. I sat in the driveway for a moment, looking at his car. Then I got out and went inside. He was in the living room, still in the same clothes he had been wearing at Sophia's house, sitting on the edge of the couch with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together, looking like a man who had aged 10 years in the past 2 hours. He looked up the moment I walked through the door. "Rebecca," he said immediately, standing up. "Please, just let me talk to you." I set my bag down near the door, and without saying a word to him, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. Drinking coffee helps calm my nerves, especially when I am upset or bothered. It helps me think things through before I take action. He followed me in. I know what I did was wrong. I know there is nothing I can say that makes it okay. But please consider the children, our family. Rebecca, please just let me explain. I turned around and looked at him. He looked terrible. His eyes were red. His shirt was wrinkled, the composed and easy version of Fred I had watched leave this house humming to himself that morning. And when I agreed to apologize to Sophia, he was completely gone. I looked at him, and I felt something I had not expected to feel in that moment. Not rage, not satisfaction, nothing sharp or hot. Just a deep, settled sadness. The kind that comes when something is genuinely over, and you both know it. "Fred," I said quietly, "there is nothing to explain. I have read the messages. I have seen the photographs. I have the hotel records and the bank statements and the email about the pregnancy." I paused. "I know everything. There is nothing left for you to explain to me. I made a mistake," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "A terrible, terrible mistake, and I know that. But Rebecca, 24 months does not erase 10 years. It does not erase what we built. Our kids need their parents together. Please forgive me. Do not use our children right now." I said firmly, "Do not bring them into this as a reason for me to stay in a marriage with a man who spent 2 years lying to my face and sleeping with another woman right under my nose while pretending that they were just friends." He sat down at the kitchen table. He put his head in his hands. "I ended it with her, right there after you left. I told her it was over. It is over, Rebecca. I should have ended it a long time ago. I was trying to find a way out before everything collapsed. I am sorry, and I don't know how to make you understand how sorry I am." "Fred," I said as I looked at him steadily, "if I hadn't found out, would you have ended things with her? Just 2 days ago, you stood in this same kitchen and looked at me with an angry face, telling me to go and apologize to Sophia, Your so-called best friend. The same woman who you had been sleeping with. Did you care about my feelings before cheating on me with her? No, you didn't. You even made our daughter keep your secret. Now you are telling me you are sorry because I discovered your affair, as though sorry can fix what you destroyed. Now listen to me, Fred. I don't care. I genuinely do not care. I said again, whether you ended it or not, whether it was over in your heart or not, none of that changes what happened. None of that gives me back 24 months. None of that deletes the messages or refunds the money you spent on her from our joint account or undoes the pregnancy that you handled without ever telling me. I rinsed my coffee cup, walked towards the kitchen door, and said, "You will be hearing from my lawyer soon. This marriage is over from my side. You and Sophia can have each other. I mean that without any bitterness. I genuinely mean it. I am releasing you both completely." I paused. "But you will not have me. Not anymore." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving him there feeling disheveled. As I walked up the staircase, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Robert Hartford. I just wanted to say thank you for telling me the truth. And I'm sorry for what you're going through. You didn't deserve this." I texted back, "Neither did you. Take care of yourself, Robert." I sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet of our room as I absorbed all that had happened these past 2 days. The bed looked different to me now. The wardrobe, our wedding photographs on the dresser, and the small, ordinary details of a life shared with someone, all of it looked slightly foreign, like furniture in a house that used to be yours. I was sad, deeply, genuinely sad in the way that only comes from real loss, from something that actually mattered. But underneath the sadness, I felt somewhat relieved that I was able to discover my husband's lies rather than living in self-denial. I met with Carol Mensa on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I laid everything on her desk, the screenshots, the hotel records, the bank statements, the pregnancy termination confirmation. All of it. She went through everything carefully, and when she finished, she looked up at me and said I had a strong case. By the end of that meeting, the divorce process had officially begun. I drove straight to my firm afterward and got back to work. Fred had moved himself into the guest room without being asked. I had come home Saturday night to find his pillow and a few of his things relocated down the hallway. He moved around the house quietly all week, carefully, like a man who understood. He was living on borrowed time in a space that no longer belonged to him in the way it once had. He tried to talk to me once. I told him to speak to my attorney. He did not try again. By Friday morning, the divorce petition had been filed. Little did I know that something more disastrous, something that made me question if Fred ever loved me in the first place, was about to happen. On that Monday, I had been at my desk since morning working through supplier orders, reviewing staff schedules, and handling the normal flow of a busy week. My staff moved around the dispensing floor the way they always did. I was standing at the dispensing counter reviewing a document when the edges of my vision went strange, blurry, and bright at the same time, and the words on the document in front of me stopped making sense. My head was banging as though someone were hitting it with a hammer. I grabbed the counter to hold myself from falling. "Mrs. Rebecca." Tina, one of my staff members who had worked with me for 3 years, called me looking frightened. I opened my mouth to tell her I was not feeling fine, but no word came out. Instead, my knees gave way completely, and I went down before anyone could reach me. I heard voices, Tina calling my name, someone shouting from the back, and the sound of feet moving quickly across the floor. I was aware of the cold, hard floor against my cheek, and then a strange, heavy darkness that came over everything all at once. That was all I could remember. I woke up in a hospital bed. The ceiling above me was white and unfamiliar, and it took me several seconds to understand where I was. There was a drip in my left arm. The room had that particular hospital smell that immediately tells your body something has gone wrong regardless of how calm you try to be. My mother was sitting beside the bed with my children and her neighbor, Mrs. Addo. She reached for my hand the moment my eyes opened. "I am right here," she said quietly. I turned my head and looked at her. "What happened?" "You collapsed at work. Tina called the ambulance." She paused. "You have been here for about 3 hours. I processed that slowly. 3 hours? Mummy. Mary came straight to the side of the bed and took my free hand. Her eyes were red. She had been crying while she sat beside my mother and watched me fight for my life. I am okay, sweetheart. I told her. I am okay. Daniel climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and pressed himself against my side without saying anything. I put my arm around him and held him there. We sat like that for a few minutes, my mother on one side, my children close, the hospital quiet around us. Then Dr. Anchi came in. He was calm, tall, and probably in his late 50s. He sat down and spoke to me directly and clearly. He told me my blood results had come back with findings that concerned him. There were traces of a sedative compound in my system, present at levels that were not accidental and not consistent with anything I had been prescribed. He said the way the compound had accumulated suggested it had been administered in small amounts repeatedly over a period of weeks. My mother made a sound beside me that she immediately swallowed. Daniel looked up at me, not fully understanding. Mary went very still. Dr. Anchi looked at me steadily. Mrs. Rebecca, I have to ask you directly. Is there anyone who could have been putting something into your food or drink without your knowledge? The room was completely silent. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. I lived with my kids and Fred, my soon-to-be ex-husband, in my home. No one else had access to my food or drink except my husband and children. Fred might be a cheat, but I don't think he would ever want to harm me physically. I turned to the doctor and said, my husband is the only adult that lives with me, but I don't think he can ever poison me. No, but Mary interrupted before I could finish talking. Her voice was small but steady. Mummy, she said, I need to tell you something. Everyone's eyes in the room turned towards her. Her eyes filled with tiny tears immediately, but she did not look away from me. I saw Daddy put something in your coffee, she said. More than once. I asked him what it was, and he said it was just extra sugar because he wanted to do something nice for you. She swallowed hard, but it did not look like sugar. It came from a small bottle he kept at the back of the kitchen cabinet. Not a normal bottle, a small one. My mother pressed her hand over her mouth. Mary, I said carefully, when did you first see this? About 6 weeks ago, she said. The first time I thought maybe it really was sugar. But then I saw him do it again 2 weeks later when he thought I was upstairs. And that time, she stopped. She reached into the pocket of her school uniform and took out her phone. That time I recorded it. I was scared, and I did not know what to do. The first time I saw him, he made me promise never to say anything about it to you. He said you would get upset, and it would make things worse. Her voice trembled. But Mummy, you are in a hospital, and I cannot keep quiet anymore. She unlocked her phone with shaking fingers and pressed play. The video was short, shot from the hallway, slightly angled, the kitchen visible through the gap in the door. Fred was at the counter with his back partially turned. His movements were unhurried and deliberate, reaching to the back of the cabinet, taking out a small dark bottle, tipping a small amount into the coffee cup, putting the bottle back, and replacing everything exactly as it had been. Then picking up the cup and calling my name from the kitchen the way he did every morning, the same way he did every single morning. I watched it without speaking. Dr. Anchi leaned forward slightly in his chair. My mother had tears running silently down her face. Daniel did not understand what he was seeing, but he felt the weight of the room and pressed closer against me. Mary scrolled to the second recording without being asked. There is another one, she said quietly. I did not mean to record this one. I had left my phone on the kitchen table by accident, and it was still recording when I went upstairs. I found it later when I looked at my videos. She pressed play on the second recording. It was audio mostly, the kitchen, the sound of the room, and ordinary background noise. Then Fred's voice. He was on the phone with someone. The call had clearly been in progress when the recording started. Sophia's voice came through clearly on the other end. How much longer do we need to do this? She said. I am tired of waiting. Fred's voice was low and measured. It takes time. You cannot rush it. The goal is not to hurt her. The goal is to make her appear unstable. forgetful, confused. Once her firm starts noticing it and her behavior becomes documented, we move to the next step. And then we petition for her to be declared unfit. Sophia said, exactly, Fred said, with her declared mentally unfit, control of her assets transfers. Her inheritance alone is $3 million. Her mother left it to her outright. Once we have legal control, everything, including her firm, will be ours. Sophia said, just make sure she does not figure it out before we are ready. Fred replied, she will not. Just leave her to me. She trusts me completely. The recording ended. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I have ever sat inside. My mother was no longer trying to hold herself together. Daniel had lifted his head and was looking at me with confused, frightened eyes. Mary was gripping my hand so tightly it hurt, and she was crying openly now. I pulled her toward me and held her. You did nothing wrong, I said into her hair. You did everything right. You hear me? You did everything right. She nodded against my shoulder, still crying. I looked at Dr. Anchi over the top of her head. I need you to contact law enforcement, I said. My voice was steady, completely steady, and I need someone to hand me my phone. My mother reached for it immediately. I called Carol Mensa. She answered on the third ring, and I told her where I was and what the doctor had found and what my daughter had just shown me in that hospital room. Carol was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then she said, do not let anyone touch those recordings. I am on my way. I held my children close in that hospital bed, and I waited. Fred had brought me coffee in bed, while he poisoned me just to take over my inheritance. I held my children close in that hospital bed, and I waited. Fred had played the role of a good husband while secretly cheating on me. He had brought me coffee in bed, while he poisoned me just to take over my inheritance. He had told Sophia I trusted him completely, and he had been right. But he had made one mistake. One significant, irreversible mistake. He had underestimated my daughter. Carol Mensa arrived at the hospital 45 minutes after I called her. She walked into that room with the focused energy of a woman who had shifted completely from divorce attorney to something far more serious the moment I described what Mary's recordings contained. She greeted my mother briefly, looked at me in the bed, and sat down without wasting any time. Show me the recordings, she said. I handed her Mary's phone. She watched both videos in complete silence. The first one is Fred at the kitchen counter with the small dark bottle. The second one, his voice on the phone with Sophia, calm and deliberate, laying out everything they had planned to do to me. Carol watched both recordings twice. Then she set the phone down carefully on the bedside table and looked at me. Rebecca, she said, this is no longer a divorce case. What your husband has been doing constitutes criminal poisoning. The conversation on that second recording is conspiracy to commit financial fraud. The intention to have you declared mentally unfit in order to access your inheritance and your firm. That is a serious criminal offense. She paused, then continued. Sophia is implicated directly as a co-conspirator. Both of them are exposed by what is on this phone. I nodded slowly. Carol looked at Mary, who was sitting in the chair beside my bed, still holding my hand. She had stopped crying, but her eyes were swollen, and she looked exhausted in the way children look when they have been carrying something heavy for too long. Sweetheart, Carol said gently, you were very brave to show your mother this. Very brave. She looked at me. Her recordings are key evidence. I am going to need to have copies made properly through the right channels so that they are admissible. Carol called someone from her office right there in the hospital room. I listened to her give instructions in that calm, precise way of hers. She needed a criminal attorney colleague contacted immediately. She needed copies of the phone recordings handled correctly, and she needed to know the status of the divorce petition that had been filed 2 days earlier. While she was on the phone, Dr. Anchi came back in. He confirmed that the hospital had already initiated their mandatory reporting process and that law enforcement had been notified. He said a detective would likely come to take my statement before I was discharged. I lay in that hospital bed, and I listened to all of this moving around me, Carol on the phone, Dr. Anchi explaining the next medical steps, and my mother speaking quietly to Daniel in the corner. All of them were doing one thing or another to protect me. At that exact moment, Fred did not know any of this was happening. He was somewhere, at the house, at work, wherever he was on a Monday evening, completely unaware that his wife was lying in a hospital bed with his poison documented in her bloodstream and his own voice recorded on his daughter's phone describing exactly what he had planned to do with her life and her money. He had told Sophia that I trusted him completely, that I could be managed easily. He had built an entire plan on that foundation, and the foundation had just collapsed. The detective came at 7:30 that evening. Her name was Detective Bridget Osei. She was a straightforward, no-nonsense woman. She introduced herself, pulled up a chair, and took out her notepad. She spoke to me, then to Mary, who answered every question clearly and without hesitation. She explained when she first saw Fred put something in my coffee. She explained why she had been afraid to say anything. She explained how the second recording had happened. Her phone left on the kitchen table by accident. The recording running without her knowing, Fred on the phone with Sophia, not realizing he was being captured. Detective Osei listened to both recordings on Mary's phone. She did not react visibly, but I watched her jaw tighten slightly during the second one. During the part where Fred said I trusted him completely, when she finished, she looked at Carol. "We will need the original device secured as evidence." Carol nodded. "We anticipated that. I have already spoken to my colleague about the correct procedure." Detective Osei looked at me. "Mrs. Rebecca, I want you to understand that what we have here is significant. The medical findings combined with the video recording of the substance being administered and the audio recording of the conversation constitute a strong body of evidence. We will be moving quickly on this, and this will be treated as a priority. For the meantime, stay away from him and make sure you stay safe." After the detective left, Carol stayed for another 30 minutes going over everything with me. The divorce petition was already filed and would continue moving forward on its own track. Simultaneously, the criminal matter would proceed on a separate track handled by her colleague, who specialized in exactly this kind of case. The two proceedings would run in parallel. Fred will be served his divorce papers. While all of this is unfolding, Carol said, he is going to find himself dealing with both at the same time. And as for Sophia, her involvement is captured directly on that recording. She actively participated in the planning. She will be implicated in the criminal investigation. I thought about that for a moment. Fred waking up one morning and being served divorce papers. Fred being called in for police questioning. Fred realized that everything he had planned so carefully had unraveled completely, not because I had done anything dramatic or reactive, but because I had simply told the truth and let the evidence speak. What about Sophia? I asked. Her involvement is captured directly on that recording, Carol said. She actively participated in the planning. She will be implicated in the criminal investigation. She paused. Her husband may want to ensure his own attorney is aware of the situation as well. I nodded. Carol left at 9 o'clock. My mother took Daniel home to her house, where he had fallen asleep in the waiting room chair an hour earlier, exhausted and confused. Mary stayed with me, curled up in the chair beside my bed, refusing to leave. The ward had gone quiet around us. The lights in the corridor outside were dimmed for the night. I lay in the hospital bed, listening to my daughter's steady breathing in the chair beside me, and I stared at the ceiling. 6 weeks. Fred had been putting that substance in my coffee for at least 6 weeks. Every morning while I made breakfast and got the children ready for school. Every morning while I trusted him in my kitchen, he would make me coffee. He had been planning to take everything from me. My firm, my inheritance, my identity, my mind. He had looked at the life I had built, every qualification I had earned, every patient I had served, every dollar I had saved, everything my mother had worked her whole life to leave me, and he had decided it was his to take. He had looked at me, his wife of 10 years, the mother of his children, and he had decided I was an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be respected. And Sophia, who had held my daughter as a newborn. Sophia, who had sat in my living room and eaten my food. She had known. She had not just been sleeping with my husband. She had been sitting across from me at dinner tables and gatherings and Tuesday phone calls, knowing that the man beside me was slowly, deliberately, systematically trying to destroy me from the inside. I closed my eyes. I was not going to cry again tonight. I had given myself that in the car after Sophia's house, and it had been enough. What I felt now was something different, something harder and quieter and more purposeful than tears. I felt the particular resolve of a woman who has seen the very worst of what someone was willing to do to her and has survived it. Not because she was lucky, because she was still here, because her daughter loved her enough to be brave, because the truth, no matter how long it takes, has a way of coming out into the light eventually. Fred had told Sophia I trusted him completely. What he had never accounted for was that my daughter trusted me more. I reached over and took Mary's hand. She stirred slightly in her sleep, and her fingers curled around mine without waking. I held onto her hand in the quiet of that hospital room, and I waited for morning. Fred was about to know that the woman he underestimated was not as small as he thought. I was discharged from the hospital on Saturday afternoon with medication, strict instructions from Dr. Anchi, and a follow-up appointment scheduled for the following week. My mother took me and the children directly to her house. I did not go back to the family home that weekend. I did not need anything from it badly enough to walk back through that door, while Fred was still inside it, especially now that I knew he had been poisoning me. Fred was served his divorce papers Tuesday morning at the house. That same day, Detective Osei's team brought him in for questioning. By Thursday, the district attorney's office had reviewed everything: the medical findings, Mary's video recording, and the audio of Fred and Sophia's conversation, and decided to move forward with formal charges. Fred was charged with criminal poisoning and conspiracy to commit financial fraud. Sophia was charged as a co-conspirator. Robert cooperated fully with the investigation. He filed for divorce from Sophia the same week. The process was now completely out of my hands. I took a few days to recover, and by early the following week, I returned to work and let the law do what the law was built to do. The charges against Fred became public knowledge faster than I expected. I had not told anyone. I had not made a single call or sent a single message to any mutual friend or acquaintance. I had not posted anything, said anything, or done anything to spread what was happening. I simply went to work, took care of my children, and let the legal process move at its own pace. But court filings are public record, and people talk. Within the first week after the charges were filed, the news had moved through their social circle completely. People who had sat at our dinner table, people who had attended the same gatherings where Sophia had stood beside my husband touching his arm while I stood 3 feet away, people who had watched me smile and hold my family together with both hands, all of them now knowing the full picture of what had been happening behind that smile for 2 years. Fred's employer contacted him before the week was out. He was placed on immediate suspension pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. 2 weeks later, he was formally let go. The man who had sat at my kitchen table telling me I was paranoid, the man who had hugged me with relief because I agreed to apologize to his girlfriend, the man who had been slowly poisoning my coffee every morning while planning to steal everything I had built, that man was now unemployed, criminally charged, and living alone in a house that was in the process of being legally divided. Sophia's interior design consultancy lost 3 clients in the first 2 weeks after word got out. Then 2 more. People in business do not want their names associated with someone facing criminal charges. And the design world in Austin is smaller than people think. Everyone knows everyone, and news travels fast. The consultancy she had built over several years began to empty out quietly and quickly in the way that professional reputations collapse. Not with a single dramatic moment, but with a series of unreturned calls and quietly canceled contracts. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning 6 months after the petition was filed. My pharmaceutical firm was fully protected, my inheritance was fully secured, and the asset division had been settled significantly in my favor given the documented dissipation of marital funds and the criminal charges pending against Fred. I also got full custody of my children and $3,500 monthly child support. I am done. I am free. 10 years of marriage. 2 children. A house with a wraparound porch. A marriage I had believed in completely and a man I had trusted with everything. All of it is now reduced to a finalized legal document. I did not cry. I had done my crying. Rather, I felt peace. Not the fragile, conditional peace of someone who has decided to pretend things are fine. The real kind. The kind that comes when the truth has been fully told, when the right people have faced the right consequences, and when you have protected your children and your work and your name and come through the other side of something that was designed to destroy you, still standing, still clear, and still completely yourself. The criminal case took a longer time. While the divorce moved on its own track, the criminal proceedings moved on theirs: investigation, arraignment, legal motions, and the slow, methodical machinery of a court case built on solid evidence. Sophia accepted a plea deal about 2 months into the process. She cooperated with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced charge, confirming on record everything the recordings already showed. The plan, the conversations, the full deliberate scope of what she and Fred had intended to do to me. Her cooperation significantly strengthened the case against Fred. Whatever she had imagined their relationship was, when it came down to a choice between protecting Fred and protecting herself, she chose herself without a moment's hesitation. Fred entered a not guilty plea. The evidence was what it was. A not guilty plea was Fred's legal right. The truth did not change because of what he said in a courtroom. The trial was relatively short given the strength of the evidence. The video of Fred adding a substance to my coffee. The audio recording of his own voice laying out the plan in detail. The medical findings confirmed what had been accumulating in my system over weeks. Sophia's testimony confirming everything from the inside. Fred was convicted on both counts. Criminal poisoning. 4 years in prison. Conspiracy to commit financial fraud. 3 years to run concurrently with the first sentence. He would serve a minimum of 4 years before being eligible for parole. 4 years for 2 years of poisoning me, 2 years of deceiving me, and a plan to take everything my mother had worked her whole life to leave me. Sophia's plea deal meant she avoided prison. She received 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a significant fine. She walked out of that courtroom free in a way Fred did not. But she walked out into a life that looked nothing like the one she had before. No husband, no consultancy, no social standing, no friendship with me, and a criminal record that would follow her name for the rest of her life. Robert's divorce from Sophia moved quickly. It was finalized almost at the same time as mine. He had been thorough and prepared in a way that made me know that he had made up his mind completely and without ambiguity the moment he walked out of their living room that Saturday afternoon. He did not waver, did not attempt reconciliation, did not look for reasons to forgive what had been done. He simply moved forward with the clean decisiveness of a man who knew exactly what he was worth and had no intention of settling for less. I respected him for that. We spoke occasionally during those weeks, just 2 people navigating parallel processes who understood each other's situation without needing to explain it to them. He never asked for more than that, and neither did I. We just wished each other well. It was simply a quiet, mutual acknowledgement between 2 people who had been wronged by the same 2 people and had both chosen dignity over despair. Fred and Sophia never reconciled. Even before the trial, their relationship did not survive the exposure. I was not surprised by that. I had understood from the moment I sat in that living room at Sophia's house that what Fred and Sophia had was never built on anything real. It had been built on secrecy, on stolen afternoons, on the particular thrill of something that was not supposed to exist. Take away the secrecy and add criminal charges and the pressure of 2 simultaneous legal proceedings. And what is left is 2 people sitting in the mess they made together with nothing romantic left between them at all. From what Robert told me in a brief call, Fred and Sophia had stopped speaking entirely within weeks of the charges. The affair ruined 2 marriages and almost destroyed me too. But in the end, there was no big confrontation or emotional closure. They just got lawyers and started blaming each other. It was not satisfying. It was just messy and disappointing. Just the completely predictable outcome of a plan built entirely on lies. Moreover, whatever Fred had believed they were to each other, Sophia had sat in a witness chair and testified against him to reduce her own sentence. And Fred, facing 4 years in a prison cell, had nothing left to offer her anyway. I thought about that occasionally, not with satisfaction, not with the sharp pleasure of watching people who hurt you suffer, just with the quiet recognition that truth has a way of simplifying everything eventually. My inheritance was fully intact. $3 million my mother had worked her entire life to leave me was sitting safely in an account in my name, untouched, protected, exactly where she had intended it to be. There had been a plan to take it from me, a deliberate, calculated, coldly executed plan that had been in motion for months, while I went about my life completely unaware. It had not worked. I thought about my mother often during those months, about the kind of woman she had been, a steady and practical woman. She understands that a woman who controls her own finances controls her own life. She had known that. She had lived it. And she had left me the means to live it too. She had raised a hard-working and prudent daughter who refuses to settle for less. I think she would have been proud of that. My main focus after the divorce was my children. I did not let what happened get to them. Daniel was 8 and processed things the way 8-year-olds do, in fragments, asking questions when they occurred to him, then going back to being a child the next moment. I answered his questions as honestly as I could at his level. I told him that Daddy had done something that had hurt our family, and that grown-ups sometimes made very bad choices. I told him it was not his fault and would never be his fault. He nodded seriously and then asked what was for dinner, and I understood that was his way of telling me he was okay for now. Mary was different. Mary had been carrying the weight of what she knew for weeks before she came forward in that hospital room, and the relief of finally telling the truth had not immediately erased the toll of carrying it alone for so long. She was quieter than usual for a while, more watchful. She stayed close to me in the evenings, sitting near me while I worked or read, not always talking, just present. One evening she asked me if I was angry at her for not telling me sooner. I put down what I was doing and looked at her directly. I told her that what she did took more courage than most adults would have managed. I told her she had protected me in a way that I would never forget for as long as I lived. I told her I was not angry. I was proud, more proud than I had words for. She leaned her head against my shoulder and wrapped her arms around me. That moment meant more to me than any court outcome ever could. Fred had told Sophia that I trusted him completely. He had meant it as a weapon, as the thing that would make his plan work. But I was still here, and he was not, and my daughter had made sure of that. 3 months later, Mary started a journal. She showed me the notebook one evening, simple green cover, her name written carefully on the front. Her teacher had suggested writing as a way of processing difficult feelings. She said she had been writing in it every few days, and that it helped. I told her that was one of the wisest things I had ever heard a 10-year-old say. She rolled her eyes at me the way 10-year-olds roll their eyes at their mothers and went back to her room. I stood in the hallway after she closed her door and pressed my hand flat against the wall and felt the solidness of it. The house, my house, the wraparound porch, the backyard, where Daniel had already claimed a corner for what he was calling his football academy. The kitchen where I now made my own coffee every morning, alone, without anyone adding anything to it. It was mine now, completely and only mine. Fred sent me a text message one Sunday evening about 3 months after everything was finalized. 3 paragraphs of apology. It sounds genuine and detailed, the kind of message a person writes when they have finally understood the full weight of what they have done and have nowhere left to hide from it. He said he was sorry for the affair. He said he was sorry for the poisoning. He said he hoped one day I could forgive him, not for his sake, he said, but for mine. I read it once, deleted it, and went back to making dinner. Forgiveness is my own business. and I will handle it in my own time and my own way. But forgiveness is not a response, and it is certainly not an open door. That door is closed permanently, completely, without any ambiguity whatsoever. I had nothing left to say to Fred that was not already on record somewhere. A journalist from a women's health platform contacted me after writing an article about financial abuse in marriage that had referenced cases similar to mine. She asked if I would be willing to share my experience for a follow-up piece. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I said yes, not anonymously, under my full name. If my story could reach one woman who was lying awake at night, dismissing the small signs, talking herself out of what she already knew, prioritizing the peace of her household over the safety of her own mind and body and finances, then putting my name on it was worth every moment of discomfort. The piece was published on a Thursday morning. By Friday evening, my phone had more messages than I could count. Women I had never met writing to say they recognized themselves in what I described. Women who had been through similar things. Women currently in the middle of similar things who did not know what to do next. Women who simply wanted to say thank you for saying it out loud. I read every single one. On a Friday evening, about 6 months after everything was finalized, I came home from work to find Mary and Daniel in the living room. Daniel was attempting to teach Mary a football move that involved considerably more falling over than actual football. Mary was laughing so hard she could barely stand. The television was on in the background, showing something neither of them was watching. The kitchen smelled like the jollof rice. I had left it in the slow cooker that morning. I stood in the doorway and watched them for a moment before they noticed me. This was what Fred and Sophia had been willing to destroy. This ordinary, irreplaceable, completely priceless Friday evening with my children in my living room, laughing about nothing. They had not destroyed it. They had not even come close. Daniel saw me first and launched himself across the room into my arms with the full, unstoppable force of an 8-year-old boy who has no concept of the weight he is transferring. I caught him and held him and looked over his shoulder at Mary, who was watching us with that quiet smile of hers, that smile that was so much older than 10 years old, and so entirely her own. "Are you okay, Mummy?" she asked. "Yes, baby. I am more than okay," I said, and I meant it in the deepest, most complete way those words have ever been meant by anyone. I want to say one final thing before I close this story. I am telling you this because somewhere out there, a woman is lying awake beside a man she is not sure about anymore, talking herself out of what she already knows, telling herself she is being paranoid, telling herself the life she has built is worth protecting even at the cost of her own clarity and her own safety. I was that woman. I am not anymore. Trust what you know. Document what you see. Protect what you have built. And understand that choosing yourself is not the end of your family. Sometimes it is the only way to save what actually matters within it. My name is Rebecca. I am a licensed pharmacist. I am the founder of my own firm. I am the mother of 2 extraordinary children. I am the daughter of Margaret, a woman who left me everything she had because she believed I was worth it. I am not someone's plan. I am not someone's obstacle. I am not someone's victim. I am a woman who found out the truth, stood up straight, and walked forward, and I have never looked back. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If it moved you, if it made you feel seen, if any part of it felt like something you needed to hear, please like this video and leave me a comment below and tell me where in the world you are watching from. I read every single one. I want to know how far this has traveled. If you are new here, please subscribe. There are more stories on this channel, stories about loss and courage, and the quiet strength of ordinary people navigating extraordinary things. Every story is told with love. I will see you in the next one. I love you all.